All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Eli Storch. I'm the chair of the Design Advocacy Group, and I'm excited to welcome you to our March 2021 DAG monthly meeting to talk about The Painted Bride. Before we get going, a few announcements, reminders. If anyone has announcements about events, things that are ongoing around the city, things you want to share with the group, please put them in the chat, and I'll call on you to unmute and bring them up. Share any links you have to events there. That's the place for it. If you have any issues, technological issues, you can message either David Brownlee or myself, and we'll do our best to help you during the presentation. And typically our DAG meetings are off the record, but given our ability to share with a wider audience, we have chosen to do that. So this meeting is being recorded and will be available on our website in the next day or two. So you can check out the website for a number of our past events, including recent meetings with Ashley Hahn, presenting on preservation in public realm, and Taya Wynn's recent presentation on the Community Design Collaborative, among other presentations. So yes, please, David, I know you had something you wanted to share with us. Do you want to unmute and share that?
Yes, I just wanted to call everyone's attention to something that I've confessed sneaked up on me, and that is that Parks and Recreation, together with Otis, have issued an RFP for consultants to undertake a planning process that will produce proposals for the further development of public amenities on the Parkway between Logan Square and the PMA. This is an RFP that also calls on, also establishes the principle of public engagement and discussion. And I believe the Lindy Institute is already on board to do that. But the RFP calls for proposals and consultant teams to submit their proposals by mid-April. It's all on the city website. It's another story in that chapter. We've had Harris Steinberg, when he led the planning team that produced the proposal called More Park, Less Way. We had him present to DAG. And we had Laurie Olin present his own sort of personal proposals for the Parkway only about a year ago. So DAG, I think, has an appropriate role to play in this. Let's be on our marks and get ready to go.
Thank you, David. Are there any other announcements, any other events upcoming? Please keep sharing those in the chat. In the meantime, I'm going to throw it over to Marcia Moss, who is going to introduce our next program, so you can pencil it into your calendars. Marcia?
Yes, thanks, Eli, and good morning, everyone. We're happy to announce that Nancy Trainer, Drexel University's Architect for Facilities, and Pete Kramer, Director for Development at Wexford Science and Technology, will be speaking at our next virtual meeting on April 22nd at 10 a.m. And together, they're going to be sharing plans for projects within U City Square, the mega mixed-use development located in West Philadelphia and University City. So please plan to join us. Eli?
All righty, thanks, Marcia. Not seeing any other announcements, events, comments at this point. So I'm gonna, David just posted the info on the Parkway RFP, so folks can go there and take a look at what's included in that. So the last couple bits of business, and then we can get into our program. The DAG Dispatch comes out Monday morning. It's a chance to read some of the local news and things that are affecting the world of architecture and design and planning in Philadelphia. So we ask you to go to our website, take a read on that. And then also, we're always looking for people to write in our forum, timely of Bob Ravelli to put a chat in there, because we're excited to have him and his forum piece there. And so we are, we're thrilled to have forum pieces. And if you have something you'd like to include and incorporate, please send it to David Brownlee through the forum page, or you can send it to dagfellow@gmail.com. So let's get into today's program. Throughout the program, please put any questions you have in the chat and we'll get to a Q&A at the end of the program. And so it's a pleasure for me to introduce Patrick Grassy, a DAG steering committee member who chairs our historic preservation task force, as well as plenty of other historic preservation activities on his non-DAG time. So it's a pleasure to introduce Patrick to introduce our speakers. Patrick.
Thanks, Eli, and good morning, everyone. My name is Patrick Grassy, and in addition to serving on the DAG Steering Committee, I also serve as Director of Advocacy with the Preservation Alliance for Greater Philadelphia, a local historic preservation advocacy nonprofit. We're here to talk about the Painted Bride. We could devote an entire panel to the long and storied history of the Painted Bride Art Center, which dates to the 1960s. You'll at least get a taste of that history from one of our panelists today. We could also probably spend an entire panel on the bride's recent past and its uncertain fate, the uncertain fate of its Old City building, which has admittedly been contentious at times. But where we are today is that the Painted Bride Art Center's former building at 230 Vine Street is potentially under agreement of sale. And a design proposal has been put forward that both preserves the iconic Isaiah Zagar mural, the so-called Skin of the Bride, which wraps nearly the entirety of the circa 1950 building, while also introducing a new multifamily building via a 6-story overbuild. It's a unique project, and to tell us more about it, we are joined today by Emily Smith and Shimi Zakin. Emily Smith has worked at Philadelphia's Magic Gardens since 2009 and became executive director in 2014. During her tenure, she has more than doubled visitor attendance and the operating budget, added 10 additional staff members, and has helped the Magic Gardens become one of the most predominant art environments in America. She's been a speaker at numerous conferences on the topics of millennial audiences, women in leadership, and the preservation of art environments. Architect Shimi Zakin has been actively involved in design and real estate development in Philadelphia since 2001. Together with his wife, Nurit Nashum, he has founded the architectural and design company Atrium Design Group and the construction company Atrium LLC. He's also managing partner for A to Z Development and A2Z Builders. Shimi's wide-ranging portfolio includes retail and commercial spaces, mixed-use buildings, multi-unit buildings, new construction of high-end custom single-family homes, and full interior renovations of high-end custom homes. The majority of these projects are in Philadelphia, but also in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and Miami. So as Eli mentioned, we will have time for Q&A, which we'll be facilitating through the chat. So please type your questions there. We'll do our best to get to as many as we can. A final reminder to please mute your cameras and microphones to make sure everything goes smoothly during the presentations. And with that, I will hand things over to Emily, who's going to start us off.
Thank you, Patrick. Good morning, everybody. Shimi, do you want to share your screen? Shimi's going to be the master of the slides today.
My pleasure. And I believe I just shared my screen, so just let me know if you see it.
It looks good to me.
Okay.
Well, thank you, everybody. My name is Emily, as Patrick mentioned. It's a gorgeous day today. I've had a lot of coffee. I'm in a really good mood, so I'm going to try and make this as fun as possible, and hopefully I won't ramble too much. Please signal me if I go off too much, but as Patrick mentioned, we could talk about the Painted Bride. I mean, for years at this point, I've been talking about the bride, and I'm going to try and just give a little bit of context to the artwork of Isaiah Zagar and why the bride is such an incredibly special piece of public artwork. So we're going to just jump into it if we can. Shimi, could you do the next slide for me?
Sure.
Thank you. There you go. That's it. All right. Well, we got to start, of course, with Isaiah Zagar. You know, for better or for worse, he's the reason why we're all here. He was born in 1939, and he is turning 82 years old today. Not today, next week, I'm sorry. He moved to South Street in 1968 with his wife, Julia. And Julia is the owner of the Eyes Gallery on 4th and South. I would recommend everyone go check out the Eyes Gallery if you can. They still live on South Street. And in '68, when the Zagars got here, Isaiah actually suffered a nervous breakdown. And when he was in the hospital, he actually had attempted suicide and he landed in the hospital. When he was in the hospital, the doctor said to Isaiah, you need to keep working. You need to keep focusing on placing one thing next to the other, and that'll help you survive. And so when he got out of the hospital, that's actually what he did. And that's how he began mosaicing. So he sort of started in his bathroom and went into his hallway and into the living room and then out the door onto the streets of Philadelphia. Shimi, if you go to the next slide, you can see, here's an early example of a mosaic. This is probably in the early 80s, we think. The site is 610 South 10th Street. It is still here. It looks even crazier than this photo today. So you can see Isaiah's style. He was a self-taught mosaicist, so it definitely has evolved from the 70s and early 80s. You can see in this photo, he had not learned yet how to cut glass. He was not using portraiture or text. There's a lot of smaller seashells, smaller tiles. So it's definitely evolved over the years and has really been honed in and developed for the past 5 decades. You can go to the next slide, Shimi. Here's a shot of Isaiah working on the Eyes Gallery, which I said is at 4th and South. This is probably late 60s, early 70s. Again, you can see his style is very different and has really evolved since then. Certainly the Eyes Gallery is, I mean, Julia Zagar's on this phone call, but it should be historically designated at some point. It's an incredible building, an incredible part of our local history. I just wanted to show a little bit of this early technique so you can see it compared to what we see mostly nowadays. And again, this building is still here. The mosaics are still here. Shimi, you can go to the next slide if you'd like. So this is really how you can identify Isaiah's work. You see things mostly looking like this nowadays. Isaiah now is considered one of the most important mosaic artists alive. His technique is known in the international mosaic community as the Zagar Method. There are a couple really important elements to the Zagar Method. Of course, monumental scale is probably the most important part of Isaiah's work. It's also total embellishment. So every square inch of the wall is covered in mosaic. He also does really free-form design. He doesn't plan the wall out before he works on it. He usually gets to the site and then starts drawing and then following with tile. There's often, in a great mosaic, you'll see a lot of stream of conscious text or drawings. Definitely the use of unorthodox materials like found objects, handmade tiles, folk art objects, and of course, really extremely personal storytelling, either of his life, so it's sort of like a diary, or of, normally it's residents of Philadelphia or community members that Isaiah is interacting with on a day-to-day basis. And then he kind of glues it all together with really brightly colored hand-dyed grout. So that's a Zagar mosaic in a nutshell. This is Cater Street behind the TLA, and that was Carlos Carpet on 9th and not Bainbridge, 5th and Bainbridge. This is how you usually interact with a Zagar mosaic. You guys probably, again, like it's of course, if you like this work or not, whether you like it or not, it's here in our streets everywhere. Sometimes you'll walk down a sidewalk and the entire street is embellished. So here, these are portraits again of local residents. Maybe they lived at that house or worked nearby. Isaiah really believes in activating the urban arena. He really believes that art should be accessible to all of us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so that's a really important part of his work, that the public is interacting with it. So that's sort of how you usually interact with a Zagar mosaic on the sidewalk. It's typically how you do it. You can go to the next slide, Shimi. I wanted to put this slide in. So this is the basement of the Magic Gardens. And it's an example of a private space that it's not open to visitors usually, but you can see the obsessive quality of Isaiah's work, that he will mosaic something, whether it's private or public. It's all about that really explosive energy and continuing to work all the time. He needs to be working. And so it's kind of this combination of anxiety and energy and just incredible need to express himself in joy. And, you know, I've worked at the gardens for about 10 years. And the more I'm here, the space isn't getting smaller. It becomes more and more complex and rich with stories the longer I'm here. And so it's really such a complicated and incredibly gorgeous catalog of work. I mean, it's so overwhelming, just the amount of work that has been made by Isaiah. You can go to the next slide, Shimi. So of course, Isaiah is known, I guess, the most known for the Magic Gardens, which is located on 10th and South, and that's the organization that I run. It's a labyrinth, fully mosaic labyrinth. It's subterranean as well as street level. We are a nonprofit museum, community space, exhibition space, event space. We opened to the public in 2008, and you know, pre-COVID times, we had about 175,000 visitors a year. So it's definitely a really important site for Philadelphia. What's kind of amazing about the Painted Bride and the Magic Gardens is that they were actually done during the same decade, which completely blows my mind that Isaiah was able to do this amount of work overlapping each other. So they were really paralleling each other, their creation. And there were other huge works being done at the same time too. So certainly what's really important about the Magic Gardens in conversation with the Painted Bride is that it's known as one of the most important art environments in America. And I think it's important because a lot of people don't understand why the Painted Bride is so special and why it is important to be saved. These sites are often really, really misunderstood. Shimi, if you could go to the next slide. There you go. So when people talk about Isaiah's work, I think they don't quite know how to categorize him or this type of work. They often say, well, this is naive art or outsider art. I've heard a lot of it's trash art, which is upsetting. Really, Isaiah is an artist, and these large scale installations can be, we define them at the Magic Gardens as art environments. So here's the Magic Gardens definition of an art environment on the right. And it's an actual genre of art. There are thousands of art environments in the world. And I included two pretty famous sites. You guys might have heard of them or visited them before. This is the Ideal Palace up top by Ferdinand Cheval in France, and then the Watts Towers by Simon Rodia in Los Angeles. Both of these sites have been historically designated and recognized for their importance, but almost all of these sites that are still in existence now, almost all of them face demolition. It's like laughable almost. So they all are threatened to be demolished, and always the reason why they are saved is because of the community or someone decided to save it, one person. So this really rich, incredible history of sites like this, it's almost the same pattern each time. And then they get saved. And the irony is that they become the historically designated, recognized cultural historic sites, and often lay the foundation of that community's economy. So it's just like we're going through the same cycle each time we see a site that's threatened. If we could just look into the future of how incredibly important it is to actually save them and what can come out of them, it's just really narrow-minded to just think that this one thing maybe now couldn't have huge impact on the future of for our communities. So I mean, the Magic Gardens was also threatened with demolition in 2004. And now the economic impact of that site being saved is millions of dollars for the local community of South Street. So again, like, what is the city's priorities here? And how can even developers be using this and leveraging this site? You can go to the next slide, Shimi. So we have 220 Zagar sites in Philadelphia. Whether you like it or not, it's really part of the cultural fabric of Philadelphia and part of the legacy of public art in Philadelphia. Most of the works that we lose are because of demolition, but they can definitely be taken care of and preserved. It's a little overwhelming, obviously, for us to think about. I don't think that Philadelphia realizes how important this work is and how special and unique it is that we have so much of it. We have more mosaics by one artist in Philadelphia than Gaudi's in Barcelona. I mean, and think of how they treat that work. I mean, we have so much here. And of course, we'll only be losing more and more. Isaiah is still working a little bit, but not at the same scale that he was before. And I think in the context of this story, what I've heard over the years regarding the Painted Bride, well, there's so many other sites. Why is the Painted Bride special? It doesn't matter if we lose it. And I think that's just a naive statement, because the bride is this incredible piece of artwork. It's truly a masterpiece and one of the best examples of the Zagar method. And I'm going to just talk to you about that next. So you can go right ahead, Shimi. Here's the bride. She's so beautiful. Oh, I love seeing this building. So here's a Painted Bride. Here in the corner, you can see this is before the Painted Bride bought the building. It's probably 1950s. It was previously an elevator factory. The Painted Bride Art Center started in 1969 on South Street. They lived on 5th and South, just one block from Isaiah and Julia. So you can see how they would be really deeply connected all these years. Isaiah and Julia have always been a big part of the bride and always have been really strong supporters of the bride. When they moved, the bride as an organization moved to Old City in 1982, early 80s. And in 1991, Jerry Givnish, who was the director of the bride at the time, invited Isaiah to mosaic the building. So Isaiah began it in 1991 and finished it around 1999. He did donate the whole piece, and I guess that's about 8 years worth of work. So Shimi, you could go to the next, the next slide. So here's the bride again, 1950s, before the organization bought the building on the left. And then here is 1991 on the right, where Isaiah had first started to mosaic the building. This is a good one. So 1993 is this photo. This is the work in progress. This mural has been described as one of the most eccentric, colorful wall murals on planet Earth. The facade itself is fully mosaiced from sidewalk to roof. It's over 7,000 square feet. It's a massive building. It's a massive installation. It is Isaiah's largest public mosaic that he's ever done. There is none that is larger than this one. And this is actually the first time he ever used scaffolding. You can see it in this photo here. Shimi, I think you could go to the next one. It's very similar. Yeah, 1993 again. You can see it's starting to take over. Half of it has not been grouted yet, but we're getting there. I think you can go to the next one too. Here's the bride on the left before the mosaic was installed. And then here, this is probably about 1998. The front facade is being worked on. It's really hard to tell in these photos how detailed this building is. Shimi, if you go to the next one, I think this is a detail shot. Yeah, so this photo, it's hard to tell the scale. This is a 2-story shot right now. You can't quite see the sidewalk or the roof, but you can see how incredibly detailed and complex this work is. So the bride, the building, it's being referenced all over the building. So the history of the Painted Bride as an organization is all over the building. And there's text often with the players of the bride, the director of the bride, the Painted Bride, all of its accomplishments. It's written all over the wall. If you go to the next slide, I think there's more detailed shots of that. Yeah, so here's again, the phrase, "You may now kiss the bride," all sorts of like bridal sayings are all over the building. These are handmade tiles by Isaiah. These are actually, I mean, these are amazing. So these are tiles by a very famous Mexican ceramicist named Jorge Wilmot. Jorge is one of the most famous ceramicist in Mexico. He's no longer with us, but if you go to a museum in Mexico, you will see Jorge Wilmot tiles. So these tiles are absolutely priceless. Isaiah and Julia have a long connection with Mexico. They've worked with artists in Mexico for many decades. And Isaiah actually worked in Jorge's studio, and that's why there's all of these incredible tiles. The triangles, those blue triangles, as well as the fish and the moons, they're really high fire, incredibly durable tiles. They're absolutely amazing. And they're all over the Painted Bride. I think the Painted Bride has more Jorge Wilmot tiles probably than anywhere in the world. It's crazy. Here's a detailed shot. I love this shot. This isn't the front of the Painted Bride. Again, a lot of what Isaiah's work is doing is kind of making heroes out of the everyday, Philadelphia resident. And this is verbatim an article from the Philadelphia Inquirer. It's honoring a horseradish vendor from South Street, A.B. Kravitz. A.B. was very beloved on the street, and when he passed away, artists came together and they made a big performance at the Painted Bride. And so Isaiah handwrote all these tiles. And he is dyslexic, so there's lots of different variation in grammar and spelling, but it's absolutely charming. And it tells the whole story of A.B.'s life. Again, just this everyday Philly guy that's now immortalized on this facade. It's just absolutely, it's so charming to me. I just can't stand it. Okay, the next one. So this is just a section of the iconic script in the front of the bride, which says the bride has many suitors even. That, of course, if you go back just one second, Shimi, that has there are many references to Duchamp all over the building. And so this is directly referencing the piece at the art museum, the bride stripped bare by her bachelors even. Of course, that's a very influential piece, and Isaiah has mentioned that all over the bride building. And then you can see again portraits. This is a dancer from the bride. And then here to the left of that face it says PR. That's a portrait. Yeah, right over there, Shimi. There you go. That is a portrait of Warren Muller, who's a Philly artist in his drag persona, Patsy Ratchet. So we have a building here with a drag queen in the front of it. I mean, that is the most Philly thing I've ever seen. So that's pretty amazing. I think you can go to the next slide, Shimi. Yeah, so here's the bride today. This is a really depressing shot for me, of course. It's it's definitely, I hope that people can remember what the bride looks like, obviously, because this has sort of been this netting for the last couple of years. It also shows how massive and huge this installation is. One of the big things that has been reported in the last couple of years is that the mural is in total disrepair. It's going to take $1 million to repair it. That's just not true. We at the Magic Gardens have always committed to caretake the facade for free to anyone who owns the building and who will save the mural. We have 3 full-time preservationists who do this work every day. So it's well within our skill set. And we did do an assessment of the building in 2019, a full assessment, and the majority of the mural is okay, and it's actually in really good condition, just needs to be cleaned. And then the sections that do need repair, again, we can definitely handle and get it all conserved and taken care of. So it's really important to say that with Shimi's design, this incredible redesign, there's potential for it to be even more beautiful and cleaned up and taken care of than it ever has been before. And I think I have one more photo. I hate landing on that the death shroud, the last photo of it. So here's the bride again, just to remind you guys how incredible this building is and how iconic and beautiful it is. I can't tell you how excited I am when Shimi shared his redesign with us. I mean, I almost fell out of I almost fell off the couch onto the ground. It was just so incredible to me that it could have a new life, that this building that's already so bizarre could become even more bizarre. Is just so wonderful to me. And I think it's such a fantastic opportunity for the city to see a collaborative moment where we can actually all come together. What a rare moment that a developer wants to work and preserve this work, and that we can actually preserve it together. I mean, what an opportunity for the city. So I think I've taken up enough time. Shimi, why don't you take it over?
Thank you very much, Emily. Good morning, everyone. Let's hope that with the future, we'll be able to remove the veil of the bride face. So 230 Vine Street, the Painted Bride, and I'm here to present our proposal to keeping the original first floor structure and to erect above 74 units multifamily mixed-use building. We'll start with the location, Old City, but a very unique section of Old City where I would call it almost an island. It's capsulated and isolated by the bridge and the I-95.
No, DuPont Street. Yeah,
Rick?
it was. A long time ago.
Rick Snyderman, I think you're, there you go. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Rick. So it's isolated in some ways, but it's a very unique section of Old City. This aerial view can nicely show how there is a nice mix of different buildings from single-family townhomes, new construction, and old historic buildings throughout industrial buildings, commercial, mixed use, different heights, billboards, high rises now, even a chimney. Then right next to us, we have an 8-story building that is pretty tall and massive inside, another one along the Vine Street. It is a mix of different size and massing and functions. Even more of available opportunities for other developments. There are undeveloped sites just across from us, just half a block away to the east, a fuel station that hopefully will be gone soon. So very unique fabric of this portion of the city. And that almost a nollie map can nicely show a diagram of the different heights from 10, 19 feet up to 100, over 100 feet buildings that all create the immediate context to our proposal. If one would not be familiar with the exact location or the site, he would probably be lost just by looking at this map or even this aerial view, how it's, to my opinion, of course, nicely blends in and yet stands out. We'll zoom into the context, and you can see the buildings to the right and to the left, to the north and to the east, and that tall building to the south of our property. New Street looking east and Vine Street looking east, and that multifamily on the west side of Bodham Street, which is a very small street, and you can see a clear shot of Bodham Street. It's not even open street on the city map. Half of that belongs to the property of the Painted Bride, and the other half belongs to the homes that stretched from North 3rd Street all the way to Bowdoin Street. The zoning for the site is as the great majority of the zonings that you can find in Old City, which is the CMX3, very easy and a zoning that allows for many proposals. It's a commercial mixed use, no height limitation in a normal conditions. Of course, here we are in Old City, and we need to work with the overlay, but a very interesting situation. We are on the north side of New Street. The other side of New Street is already what they call the bridge approach section, which allow for taller building than what the overlay limit to the 65 feet tall buildings. Also 75% open space, but 84 corner lots, only for the reason that Bowdoin Street is not an open street on the city map. This property will not considered as a corner lot, but it is in fact one. So some of the design objectives that we came to when we came to design the addition, we put to ourselves as an highlight. And of course, the main one and the most important is, while keeping the building, to celebrate the history of Old City and the Painted Bride arts. And as an art center, I was myself fascinated by the events of Old City First Friday. When I first arrived at Philadelphia, and my wife and myself find ourselves in almost every month at the first Friday, going through those beautiful galleries. And when I came to design this building, I wanted to bring that in as one of the programs to the first floor commercial and first floor building. Also hierarchy of spaces that separate or transitioning from the public right of way, if you call it, but the street, Vine Street, into the very private section of the building, which is your apartment or your residential unit. And I will speak about it more in depth in a few seconds. This chart can nicely summarize the proposed design, the proposed building, 77,000 square foot gross area. At first, we designed that with 5 stories of long-term residential apartment buildings, 64 units total, with 10 units of Airbnb or short-term as a connector piece between the first floor and the building above. I wanted to create the separation not just in form, but also in program. Listening to the neighbors, we were very happy to eliminate the Airbnb and to just create one 74 unit building. You can see the small piazza that is today existing by the shape of the Painted Bride structure, and we wanted to repurpose that as the main entrance to the building, and to reinforce it even more by those sculptural chopsticks columns, if you wish, that will hold a section of the building hovering above the Painted Bride. Not touching the Painted Bride was an important point for us, and the concept was completely floating above and let that skin of the bride be what it is, and not be touched. We literally repurposed each and every opening of the existing first floor envelope, and we are not proposing to open any new ones, and I'm pretty proud of that. On the 3rd floor, there is a garden that designed above the addition, And that's part of, again, one of the important points that we are in Atrium like to see in every development involved multifamilies and many people, to encourage collaboration and integration between those people who live within the building. Also, roof decks are designed as an amenity and outdoor areas. So here's a good shot of the image that we have in mind. The design of the structure above, as I mentioned, is here to give contrast and yet respect at the same time the original piece on the first floor by not touching it. And the second floor set back about 8 foot to 9 foot away from the painted, the skin of the bride. This creates a nice opportunity for an outdoor area to be used by those residents who are living on the second floor. You can see the chopstick sculptural elements that nicely reinforce the entrance to the painted bride residence. Another view from North 3rd Street, and you can nicely see how it's absolutely appropriate in massing and scale. The size of this building, even though it is 85 feet in height and it's above what the overlay calls for, because of the context, because of the unique fabric of this section of Old City. We will go through a few of the design elements that led us, and we will show a few of the examples, not just on the painted bride, but other work by our office. So old and new. This articulation and separation of forms highlights the distinction between old and new. And it happens in the painted bride, but it also happens in other projects. 1914 Rittenhouse Square nicely show how the connector can be vertical, not necessarily horizontal, and separate between the old and the new portions. And by the setback and the articulation of the facade and the composition of the different components of the facade creates the main entrance to the house. Same with another project at 305 North 15th Street, right here, where the existing two-story brick building that most of us are familiar, because that's the first building you see as you take the ramp from 676, is again getting an addition on top. And that addition is separated by a connector piece that has its own entity and it's set back. Same with another residential unit on Chancellor Street. Bold massing, it is important. When I stand in front of the painted bride, I could not just put on top of it another building that we all see around with bay projections and a collage of different materials. The idea was to bring one monolithic massing that will give a contrast to the very eclectic and very busy in a good way of the mosaic on the first floor. Not to have different shapes, not to have different window schedule and rhythm, but to keep it very quiet and very monolithic, but yet very interesting in the way we chose the materials, and that will be the next slide. The courtyard, as I mentioned before, a very important part of the building. We have it on the 3rd floor, and it's create the openness to bring more light and air, not just to the painted bride structure, but also to the context, those buildings that stretch from North 3rd to Borden Street, and not to create one solid facade along that narrow street. You can see it in many other of our proposed buildings in the city for multifamilies. You can see the piazzas, the courtyards, and the gardens. And back to the materials. I was influenced by the new museum at New York. I really was intrigued by this stretched expanded metal and how that can be an amazing material to cover the building. And in some ways, I'm calling it the skin of the groom, if the skin of the bride exists on the first floor. We use it now in 10 houses project that we designed by the Mormon Temple on North 17th Street, and it was very successfully done. So I'm happy to reuse this material again as the skin of the groom floating above the painted bride. It gives a very nice contrast to the mosaic. It's almost feel like another type of mosaic without being one. That section makes it more clear of how the building works in program. So the commercial space, which can be used as an art, a venue for performance art, or any other, hopefully a tenant who will be use this space in the spirit of Old City. Apartment lobby and the garage for 12 cars coming into from New Street, off New Street. Again, repurposing the one large opening that is part of the facade of the existing structure. The setback of the second floor with the gardens and the visitor accommodation units, which are now will be apartment for rent, long-term units, and then the 64 units above and the garden. And then there is a seventh floor setback to create more loggias and outdoor spaces. Structurally, it is a challenge of how we keep the skin of the bride, the first floor undisturbed. And we took a decision to offset all the structural columns away from the envelope. That way we can avoid unnecessary underpinning work, which can hurt and can shake the painted bride. Also, we are not proposing a new basement, so will be no excavation on site. There will be individual piles that will be inserted into the ground with individual columns to support a steel structure that will be inserted into the envelope, both to hold the hold the structure of the envelope and to build a platform for the 3A framing construction type addition on top of the third floor. This is a good view looking to the west of the garden on the third floor and the materials and the setback of the seventh floor. I love this shot in particular. It's a view from the elevator lobby from every floor. This one in particular is the fifth floor. So back to the site plan, we'll walk very quickly through some floor plans. We have the piazza with the main entryway into the gallery. This gallery, in my mind, will be available for those artists that are not able to find a house for their art and to present their art in those fancy galleries along the neighborhood. That will be available for them for free to hopefully present their beautiful creations. And that will be an area where it will be an open to the public space. From this door over, this is where the lobby starts for the units, and that becomes a step into the more private section of the building. The garage, as I mentioned before, off New Street, and the commercial space and the secondary residential access is also through Vine Street. By that, with separating pedestrian entrance and circulation from vehicular one. 74 units, as I mentioned, and we were able to do many more if we were do more studios and one bedrooms, but we chose to keep it at 74 with 26 two-bedroom units, 46 of one bedrooms, and only 2 studios in this building. All the units are well designed, to my opinion, with elimination of any hallways. So the design is very efficient, and those units are gorgeous. Those on the second floor have access to an outdoor garden created by the setback. The third floor unit is the typical floor all the way up to the sixth floor, 14 units per floor. And then the seventh floor, we have the larger units with balconies and the roof deck, which will be used for all the accessible for all the residents in the project. We made sure to set it back not just 5 foot by as required by zoning, but much more in order to keep the privacy of those people living on along Vine Street. I know that the roof deck parties in Old City is an ongoing issue that we want to avoid. And that's the last slide showing the view from one of the 7th floor units of the balconies looking to the west on a beautiful day. With that, I think that we are ready to have an open discussion, and I'm happy to answer any question.
All right, thank you both for 2 presentations that were within the time frame we allotted, and were both really visually compelling. So if you have questions, now would be the time to get them in the chat. I've seen a couple have come through already. Emily, this is one that actually came in while you were presenting specifically about Zagar's work. Quote, "These beautiful tiles must add an incredible amount of weight to the structures. Does Isaiah consult with structural engineers before starting?" And maybe depending on your answer, Shimi, you could chime in on how you're approaching that issue.
You know, I wasn't there when it was being designed, but knowing Isaiah, I would say he probably was not consulting with an engineer. Certainly with the Painted Bride, it was happening very organically. I don't even think that they had even planned on doing the full facade at the time that Isaiah started. What's important with Zagar murals is that they do have a very strong substrate behind them. So you couldn't, you can do inside murals, but the walls we do like to have reinforced usually if you're really putting a lot of weight on them. The Painted Bride is brick and cinder block, so the walls can take it, but I'm not, you know, underneath, I'm not an engineer, I wouldn't know. I don't think Isaiah planned it that way. That's not usually Isaiah's style.
The fact that the building is indeed a masonry building definitely helps in respect to that question. Again, keeping the structure away from the envelope, from the original building walls, as I showed in this slide right here. Definitely helps by not adding more shaking and disturbing the foundations, the original foundations of the original structure. And again, the elimination of the basement makes a huge helps here with keeping the foundations of the building undisturbed.
Thank you both. There are a couple questions here about the proposed building's relationship to North Bodine Street and the properties on Bodine. I don't know if there's a page somewhere in your presentation, Shimi, that illustrates that.
I believe this slide, more than any slide, can nicely show how the fact that we introduced the garden to on top of the 3rd floor opened up that building to those houses on the second on North 3rd, and more so the fact that the building is hoovered above and create a setback here. And I will go to I believe this slide also give some relief to those units. If we were to design a building, which we could, of course, that is stretched from Vine Street all the way to New Street, with solid facade, even though it will be 65 feet in height, as allowed by the overlay, it will be a terrible condition to those units, those buildings along Bowdoin Street. But the fact that we're opening up that area and we're setting back the second floor definitely improves the condition.
Question also about any ambitions for LEED certification, energy efficient approaches.
We're definitely looking into it, but it's too early in the stage. We are still looking to get it approved by the zoning board of adjustment and Orphans Court. So we have long way before we get to actual construction documents and to talk more in details about this subject in particular. But yes.
Fair enough. This one maybe you could field, Emily. Somebody's curious to hear how Zagar himself feels about this proposal.
Oh yeah, well we, it's been a long couple of years for us, and like I said, when Shimi, before we went public with the design, he contacted Isaiah, Julie, and I, and we were in a meeting, and we're all trying to play it cool, except the Zagars were so excited. They kept saying, oh my, they were like gasping at each slide. They kept saying, oh, this is it. This is the thing that's gonna, it's the new life of the bride. And, when we got off the phone, Isaiah is such a collaborative spirit, and he really loves when someone is, obviously working to save the skin of the bride. That's important, of course. But to see it, this new manifestation is thrilling. I mean, it's exciting. Isaiah is definitely not a purist. He doesn't think it has to, only that particular one story building has to remain. He really was hoping that it could be saved and re-energized and brought into this new life. So the Zagars are just so excited, and they called Shimi the next day and they said, well, this is just the best. We're so thank you so much for moving in this direction. And I don't think Shimi really emphasized it enough. He created this design within the confines of this existing, the windows, the doorways. He's saving the entire facade as is, and to work within that confined space and to create, it was so much work, and to rethink it all. He didn't have to do it this way, but it's just unbelievable when you really, really look at this building, how it can be reused. It's just very exciting for everybody on our end.
Thank you, Emily.
Along those lines, Emily, there are a couple of questions here just about kind of what the plan might be for long-term maintenance of the mural.
Oh yeah. Well, so the mission of the Magic Gardens is to preserve the artwork of Isaiah Zagar, both on site at the Magic Gardens and all of the 220 other sites that we have right now. It's a pretty daunting task, but it's definitely, we've already really started doing a lot of that work. So, for us, it might seem, it's a lot easier for us to conceptualize working on this building. When you're preserving this work every day, you have a totally different understanding of it. So once we do the initial repairs and cleaning and sealing of this has never really had any work done on it for the past 30 years. So once we get it cleaned and repaired and sealed, it's not going to need a ton of maintenance as long as we keep eyes on it and we have a responsible owner who can let us know if something has gone awry. So, with us in the corner and saying, we need to check on this every year and make sure that it's still looking good. It's not as daunting to us, I think, as it would be to the public. And we have a budget for it. We have a specific fund of restricted funds just for preservation work. So that's going to be constantly, taken care of. And for us, we think it's an exciting thing, and we can't wait to do it. it's not as scary to us as it is to everyone else.
Another technical question for you, Shimi. Just asking to repeat the material used for the metal sheath material that you're using as the principal facade material.
Yeah, so again, this is an aluminum expanded sheets that they come in different sizes and different expansion, I guess. We had a huge success using them again in one of our projects currently under construction in Lower Logan Square area by the Mormon Temple. What's nice about it, it is absolutely maintenance free. We do not want to, and all the selections of materials for this edition done by using basically maintenance-free materials, and it was extremely important for us. Maybe again, we can go back to that view, that image that nicely show a zoom of that expanded metal and how it's now installed on one of those houses in North 17th Street. So it's a great material to use. It's you cannot even see the connections between one sheet and another. It completely disappears once you put them together very close to another. The rest of the materials that you see in this elevation right here are wood effect aluminum vertical slats and aluminum cladding system, ACP around the windows where we have the indentation between the two masses.
Thank you. There are some questions here about the permitting process. We should be very clear that this is a proposal at this time. It would require some variances. We're not necessarily here to, litigate what the ZBA may or may not decide, but maybe just for informational purposes, Shimi, could you just talk about which variances will be required?
Yeah, so there are two variances that we are facing here. Both of them are related to the fact that we're keeping the original structure. I'll go to that one sheet right here. So I'm sorry, three of them. We have an 85 feet proposed building where 65 is allowed in the overlay. So we are 20 foot higher, which is roughly the height of the original structure we are preserving. We are exceeding the 25, we have less than 25% of open space as required in CMX3 for non-corner lots. And that's due to the fact that the Painted Bride structure occupies more of the land than what we proposed on top. When you look at the third floor addition and up, that garden is actually 24% open. So it's almost meet the required 25% open space. And the FAR, we are exceeding by 565, where 500 is allowed. And that again, due to the square footage of the Painted Bride added to the addition above. If we were doing the addition all the way down, obviously we were below 500 ratio, 500%. So those are the three refusals that we are hoping to get approved by ZBA.
And not to give you a further headache, but the building is within a local historic district. This is a question I had myself. So it's a non-contributing structure.
It is.
There was an effort, I think, as many people on the call know, to have the mural historically designated. That was unsuccessful. But nonetheless, it is within the historic district, and because it's a developed structure, it does trigger the historical commission's authority. Have you given any? I realize there's a ZBA process in front of you, but have you given any thought to the historical commission process as well?
We had few preliminary discussion with them, and I want to believe that it is actually looking promising. And historical commission has always encouraged architects to design a bold or a modern addition in historical sections of the city to nicely and better identify what's old and what's new. And it's not going to be the first bold and modern proposal for addition that we put in front of the commission. And so far, so good. So I'm very optimistic.
And I'm seeing a couple follow-up questions on what I just offered. I can just clarify that the Old City Historic District, all the historic districts have what's called a period of significance, basically kind of like the markers of time that the district is seeking to recognize. So the Old City District, for example, its period of significance ends in 1929. So buildings constructed past that date are not considered contributing to the district. There could be buildings that are individually designated that were constructed past that point. The Bride building, it appears to be a circa 1950 garage. So that's why there was an effort to have it individually designated. And the mural itself was done in the 90s. Typically a property being considered for historic significance doesn't have to, but usually meets around that 50-year mark. That's kind of around the point that we start to evaluate historic significance. Again, it's not a hard and fast rule. It's just a guideline, but hope that clarifies the non-contributing issue. Another question here, if there are any other Isaiah works that should be considered for some form of recognition, protection.
I mean, all of them, of course, but the Bride, we've always talked about this. The Bride is definitely one of them. I would definitely argue for the Eyes Gallery, which, sort of started in 1968. The gardens itself, the Magic Gardens, certainly I think at some point could be looked at. Other thing, the house that the Zagars live in, the Walking Street Studio, some of these are still works in progress. And certainly the only one currently that is threatened is the Painted Bride. And that's sort of a lot of that conversation. If you can be, safely caretaking these works and the owner is, in theory, not going to tear anything down. And these are works right now that are still owned by the Zagars or the Magic Garden. Certainly we're not going to tear anything down. I mean, down the line though, for sure. And I got my feet wet a little bit trying to designate the Painted Bride. It was certainly a learning experience. But I think right now, this one is the biggest, the one that's threatened the most. And that in terms of a building, for sure.
I guess to follow up on that, Emily, you mentioned the Watts Tower and some other, what you're deeming art environments. Are there other municipalities, other arts organizations who you feel are kind of modeling the preservation and protection of places like that?
I think there's a lot to be desired in this realm. There's one nationwide, there is the Kohler Foundation and Museum up in Wisconsin is actually, their mission is to preserve art environments in America. And it's in Wisconsin, it's not here, obviously local, but they really have done a lot of work to develop language and processes to preserve these sites. It's still, it's getting more and more mainstream that these sites are so important to historic and cultural significance within that community. And it's less of an outsider concept. Like we're really breaking down some of these barriers that might have kept the otherness intact. So I think it's becoming more and more beloved in some ways, but there's a lot, there's no overall organized push, unfortunately. And like we see with the Bride, it's still a really misunderstood situation that people say, well, this isn't even art. I don't know what the, you know, we might as well just tear it down. And it takes a long time and a lot of education, unfortunately. And I think in general, in Philadelphia, there's a lot to be desired in terms of historic preservation and preservation in general. So we're not all quite there yet.
No, we're not. A couple more specific questions, I think, for you, Shimi. One is, if you mentioned how you're going to essentially maintain the existing openings, fenestration, would you be replacing those windows and doors with modern materials, or keeping what's in place?
No, we will keep only the opening, but within the opening, there will be new windows, new storefronts inserted. I think that in the spirit of what was there before, but I don't think that this is what really is significant in keeping the components of the mural. A new storefront definitely will be for the commercial space. Same for the entryway to the gallery and the lobby. And of course, in the back, we will need to introduce new doors and garage doors to the parking area. So yes, we are keeping the openings, but we are not keeping the doors.
And similar question, and I realize this is probably very conceptual, but any thought of a lighting scheme, particularly for after dark, to highlight the mural?
Absolutely, absolutely. We're developing a beautiful site lighting plan to celebrate the mural, to make sure that the mural will be nicely lit at night. I believe in one of the illustrations, we actually added a few lighting components. I'm not sure that I see them here. But yes, the question is absolutely, yeah. We are, in particular, we were talking about some downlights, recessed lights in the pavers to shine those elements, and along the wall leading to the front doors of the gallery. But besides that, there will be other lighting fixtures to wash the painted bride mosaic.
This isn't necessarily a question, but there's a kind of discussion of sorts in the chat about the kind of design direction that you took for the overbuild and how that interacts with the surrounding environment. You talked a little bit about kind of old and new working together. Can you maybe expound on that just a little bit more, your decision to go with a you know, kind of unapologetically modern design?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, this section of Old City is very different than other section or the more defined area of Old City to the south of the bridge. So the context is not the kind of context you will meet going closer to Market Street. Those typical four-story attached buildings that you see along North 3rd Street and North 2nd Street. Here, there is a mix of different massing and different buildings, different purposes. As I said, from industrial through commercial to single homes. So with that, I think that adding this bold building to that fabric is absolutely, again, appropriate and works very nicely in the street scape. I didn't think that any brickwork or any other cladding material that you see a lot in Center City, siding, hardy boards, or aluminum siding will be the appropriate design for the massing. We wanted to create something that is in some ways different than what you see around. That is almost plays the role of a sculpture as an individual artwork floating above the painted bride. So with that, we did not want to try to blend in so much, but we respected the proportions of the windows that you see along Old City area. So there are elements that brought in, but in a way that the building entirely stands out.
Thank you for clarifying that. I'm not seeing any other direct questions. There's some accolades in the chat for both of you guys, which you can read yourselves.
Yeah.
So unless there's another question that's going to come in the chat in the next minute or so, I think maybe I will hand things back to Eli to close us out.
Absolutely. Thank you. That was a wonderful presentation. I enjoyed all of it. I am really intrigued by the building and the process. Shimi, if anyone wants to support at the ZBA, do you want to give your CBA date and information again?
Yeah, so if I'm not mistaken, it is on April 21st. April 21st, and I'm not sure about the hours, but I'm sure that it's listed on the ZBA website. But I hope to see a great support. It's a very unique project indeed.
It's unique and it's wonderful, and I certainly appreciate you bringing it to us to share. We welcome you if you want to drop in. We have our next meeting the next day on the 22nd. If you want to drop in on the comments and let us know how it goes, we certainly would love to hear the outcome.
Depends on the mood. That'll be.
I think that is fair enough. Well,
I may not be happy to to join in.
We wish you the best. Thanks to you. Thank you, Emily, and thank you, Patrick. It was a great presentation. And again, we'll be back April 22nd to talk with Pete Kramer from Wexford and Nancy Trainer from Drexel about UCD Square and the Science Leadership Academy School that they are wrapping up construction on up there. So thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Have a great day. Thank you.